Good evening, everybody. I believe we can start the bond meeting for tonight. So for you guys that are not familiar with the process, the Boerne Open Neighborhood Discussion is a voluntary meeting that we ask the applicants of any kind of development around the city to come before the community and try to explain what the request is before they have an official public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. It's kind of an idea to have a conversation and try to help solve some of the questions and address some of the issues before the item is officially presented to P&Z and Council. Currently, for this meeting, we have 3 items that are going to be discussed. We're going to start discussing the 416 West Highland. It's St. Peter's rezoning request. We, after that, are going to go for 109 West Evergreen, and that would be also a rezoning request. And the last item on the agenda tonight is going to be 12 Herff, and that would be a special use permit request. So we'll try to go in this order. And I would ask you, if you have questions, you can raise your hand and we can see it on the side of the screen, or just be respectful when you're trying to ask your question and interrupting other people. So the first item on tonight's agenda is actually part of City Council Member Quentin Scott's district, and he is present here. Do you want to say a couple of words, Quentin?
Yeah, I just welcome everybody to these meetings. We've had mixed results as in attendance. So I'm glad to see we have a bunch of people here, eager to hear what we have to people to say on these items. So I think the first one you said was Evergreen?
No, it's going to be Highland.
Oh, the Highland, okay. And so that is was that application made, or is that just a kind of a question for the table?
No, that is a real application. So St. Peter's is requesting to change the zoning of a parcel that is on R1M to Civic.
Right. Okay, now the Civic is a new designation or new zoning that was created with the UDC, so seems appropriate for the spot, but we just wanted to get any comments on it. So hopefully maybe we have somebody here that has any comments on it.
Yes, so let me share my screen. I have a few maps of the location. Sorry, technology. Can you guys see my screen with the location of the
Yes.
site?
Yes, we
So
can.
we also have Rick present at the meeting here at the meeting. Rick is the applicant for the church. Let me just explain really fast. So they are subdividing the property, and the request to rezone is just this part over here where you have Highland, School Street, and Hossack on the north side. Currently zone R1M, and the request is for a civic zoning category. And as Quentin was saying, civic is a new designation, and the idea, as name is to be used for civic and institutional use. Currently the R1M, it's a medium density residential. And the lots would be 7,800 square foot lot with 65 foot if it was to be developed as residential category, but the properties belong to the sisters for many years, and I don't think there's any desire on changing that. Rick, if you want to explain a little bit of what you guys plan to do with the site.
Why did I leave? There we go. Really not making any changes with the site. We were interested in building a pavilion to help service the parishioners of St. Peter's. Currently, our pavilion is located on our church property off of Krakonski. We're really in need of some parking. So we're wanting to move the pavilion to the property, this 416 property. And so we're interested in building a pavilion on it, but the use of the property is not going to change as far as it was the sister's property. Now it's ours. We have meetings there and just simple things like that. So it's not really increasing to do any additional activity than what's already happening on the property now.
So thank you, Rick. Yes, from the plans we've seen from the church, the idea is to keep as is. There's a minor difference between the R1M and the Civic. There's some more flexibility on the number of structures that they would be allowed to put on a Civic that a R1M wouldn't necessarily allow, but there's also use restrictions based on the civic institutional aspect of the zoning category. I think that's a very straightforward request. Does anybody have questions, comments? Seeing anybody? Are you
Yes.
guys? Oh, go ahead, Rufus.
Okay. You mentioned, Rick, about parking. So we'll need additional parking for the pavilion, or is the existing parking enough?
The pavilion has the existing parking at the property. There is no parking in that area right now. So we're looking at putting, there's the new Sarah can highlight on that page that we just had up a while ago. It just adds a few more parking, but not a lot. There's the new drawing and
Here.
of the building there, and then it's got the 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 drawn in there for parking, because we're not increasing people technically. We'll use the existing parking that's already on the property.
Okay, that was probably the only question I had. Doesn't sound like, sounds like not a big change. So I mean, we're in the neighborhood right to your south. So
Okay. No, the current use of the property is just meetings and things like that. The pavilion just allows a place to like cook barbecue or stuff like that. It does not increase the parking, or like I said, we're adding about 6 spots because the property already on the other side of the buildings has the parking lot there, and we don't see any added activities because of the pavilion.
okay, thanks, Rick.
Mhm.
That was my only question.
Anybody has any other question?
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. One of my questions is that why do we need to reclassify this? I mean, I'm looking over at St. Peter's property, which is still significantly, a lot of it is still zoned the R1M. Well, it was R1 under the previous code. And the Benedictine sisters have had the R1 zoning since we had zoning. I mean, they've owned the property since 1959, like 1962 or 3. And they've never really had to go and change anything else. And yet they have run a semi-commercial operation the entire time.
So yes, before there was more flexibility on the regulations and especially on the enforcement of some of the aspects of it. But one of the things that R1M right now has in our regulation, it only allows for one accessory building per lot. So as a civic, you have more of a flexibility of having multiple structures on a lot. As a residential lot, you don't have that ability. The same is going to happen for the church, for the sister's property over here, the remainder of this lot. So ideally, they would come and rezone the whole thing as civic. But when the UDC was adopted, we didn't change zoning categories. If you had residential, you stayed residential. If you had commercial, you stayed commercial. And the same was done for the civic institutional properties. So this is why it was zoned from residential to residential, and we didn't make that change, even though civic is a new zoning category. Does that make sense?
Well, no, it does. The thing is that this isn't the first time that this property has come up for rezoning. When the Benedictine sisters were in possession of this particular tract, they came before planning and zoning requesting a B2 highway related commercial, because that's under what they were currently utilizing it for. And then, of course, they came out in the meeting that they said the property was restricted, that they couldn't change any use without it coming back. Now, they didn't themselves say that. They came through the voice of Chris Turk at that time. Of course, this deed gave them fee simple interest, and within a few years, they had put it up for sale as a commercial property. The reason why I'm asking is because this is the entire tract that's going to be that. We're talking about a small part of it, but the entire tract will be under that, which allows a lot of other things to be done without having to come and ask in the future. Right now, they would have to have a development plan if they wanted to get it, or a special use permit, which I don't know if the city is providing at this time.
No, so the civic, if you look at the table of uses, the civic institutional zoning category allows basically to civic institutional uses as assembly, club, college, correctional facility, government facility, library, museums, parks, school, public safety facilities. So that type of use. All the other that would be considered almost like a commercial use, they're not allowed. And you're correct on the part that you're allowed to have an assembly on R1M on the residential use, but you do need a special use permit if it's a brand new assembly, as the use is already there. If they just wanted to renovate the site, they wouldn't necessarily require a special use permit.
Okay, you have to understand, I have some concerns, because the very entity that's requesting this in the past, using the same architectural firm, built a building that was way out of code, and then they asked for forgiveness rather than permission to break it at that time. And so, and I sat there and had to reluctantly say, no, don't tear down your tower that is blocking the view and it doesn't meet the code. So I'm just saying is that they have a history of coming in and asking for forgiveness rather than permission. And I just want to question this a little bit further. That's all I'm doing. And so this is not a small tract of land. In the city of Boerne, this is a huge tract of land. And once they get this zoning, even though they're not saying that they're going to have any entrances on School Street or Hosack, West Hosack, they certainly can. It doesn't prevent them at all from doing such things. So that's the reason why I'm asking. And a civic it's right after you come up with industrial in the zoning classifications. It's after you get to highway related commercial and residential or neighborhood commercial. It's a very generous zoning. That's the reason why I'm questioning it right now.
Currently, even with an R1M, they are allowed to have access out of Hosack if they wish to.
Yes.
They already have the access on Highland, and actually over at School Street, that
They
property,
use that, yes.
it's a city owns a little strip of land over at School Street, so they don't officially face School Street. That's city's property. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand, I used to have the the coding, the codes memorized, but now there's something like 300 pages long. I can't memorize that much material. And in looking at it, it's very, very general under this new system. There is no minimum size for the land for a civic versus others. There's really no maximum building. And I don't know what the setback lines would be on this, except by fire code.
So Civic has more flexibility exactly because of the use of it. The idea is kind of more community oriented type of use. We do limit the impervious cover of any area. So as Civic, let me open up.
Okay.
They have a limit on 70% of maximum impervious cover. As you can see, they have way more than that. And even if you're creating that impervious cover, you're still going to have to solve the drainage overflow that's going to cause. So our regulation right now kind of it does allow it, but you still need to mitigate. I do also agree with the part about the permission and forgiveness. So this all came up because they're platting the site to pull a building permit. So all this process is bringing them up to the current regulation and making them work with what's in place and apply it everywhere.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I haven't been a planning and zoning commissioner for several years now, so forgive me. But I would think that a better option here with anything that they're doing would be to have, a development plan that is approved rather than a blanket zoning, especially like this. I am not familiar with this, but like I said, it looks like it's more. I see down here C2 and C3. I would say that it's more generous in what you can do than C2 or C3. And it probably even fits in, I don't know what we call it anymore, but it used to be the B3 zoning in downtown Boerne. So I just, if I've got the code sitting up here on my screen and could go through and look at it. But like I said, it's very general. There's no specifics that I can pinpoint.
So the C1, C2, and C3 all are commercial zoning categories. And for instance, they allowed for restaurant, retails, and things like that
Sure.
are not allowed in a civic use. So that is already a huge difference between one and the other.
Right. Okay.
And as I was mentioning, they do have to plat the site. So after the zoning, they're going to have to work on the plat part. And I don't see why. Once they do the whole platting process and come up to a standard, I'm not sure if it's going to be a development plat or a subdivision plat or how exactly that's going to be. Depending if it's a development plat, they would have the site plan on the plat recorded. But those
Okay.
are all steps that are going to come after the zoning process.
Right. I'm just saying the last time, and I'm looking at where the last edition that they did, which is still zoned R1M now, and they have something that is what, 60, 70 feet tall over there, or maybe taller than that. We have no idea what they're going to do, but they would not be under any requirements once they have the zoning to really ask for much more permission than what's allowed within the code.
Scott,
Yes.
this is Frank. I need to correct you on that project. I was the architect. I don't think Rick was involved in the building until later. It was
No,
Tony
I'm
Suarez.
talking about your firm. Your firm designed it and oversaw it. Yes.
Yeah, but we met the code. There were no height restrictions on bell towers or campaniles. That was the code.
So you weren't there at the meeting and in city council chambers when they were asking permission or forgiveness so that they didn't have to tear down their tower.
They didn't have to tear down the tower.
No, I was one of the ones that forgave them. I can tell you, I was in that meeting.
Well, anyway, the tower, there was no code restriction. If you read the code, campaniles and towers, which are not habitable, there were no height restrictions. The height restrictions was 38 feet. And the roof is measured by the middle of a gabled roof. So you don't measure the ridge on a pitched roof. You take the midpoint of the gable ridge and the eave, the midpoint of that 2-story roof from the street, it was less than 38 feet. So we met the code.
No, because you started out on Kronkowski Street, but the building started out way
There's no
below.
right of way on that street. That
But-
street is not
No,
anyway.
I know, but I'm just saying, let me just stop you right there. If there was no breaking of the code, there would have been no reason to have that meeting in which the neighbors had to give forgiveness so that the city wouldn't impose the then code. I'm just telling you, I was in there. I was
Well,
there. The Sultan Fusses were there. They're the ones that
they were
suffered.
complaining because that roof blocked their view, and that roof met the code from Kronkowski. So I know the church had a courtesy to just say, hear them out, but we met the code. We went through the permit process. It went through the whole vetting process. We went through.
Like I
his-
said, I sat in that meeting too.
Frank.
So it's
So-
like, if it was a
Just-
non-issue, then it shouldn't have had a meeting. Anyway, it's a
second,
totally
guys.
different thing. I'm just saying is that they came in asking for forgiveness in that particular instance. Okay,
Well, I just feel like you're saying this church is going to go about, they're not. And I'm not
So,
part of this
Frank-
project, by the way. I'm
Frank
here
and
for the
Scott.
second.
yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. That's not the part that we're discussing on the meeting tonight.
True.
And I understand your concern, Scott.
Yes,
And I think it's all valid. It's part of the conversation. And I think it's healthy and good discussion, but that's right now not the topic that we're going to be talking about. It's just
right. No, I'm
that
just,
segment.
so I'm just saying, okay, they said what they want to build. As I can just tell you, the question always comes up, it's not what they want to build, but what can they build? And, and I was always like, yeah, they could build this, but no, the chances of them building or anybody else building are not going to happen. I mean, this track has a lot of topography to it. It's the water isn't going to sit on it. So, I mean, that is a concern. So if you happen to be down on O'Grady, or as it goes down, the runoff will be substantial. And I'm sure the city will handle that part. I'm hoping as far as the runoff. But like I said, my concern is I looked up. There's nothing in the code, and when you have the meeting in the future for this, and it goes before planning and zoning, I would say be prepared for that.
So we do have the drainage requirement and the LID requirements that are all been in place with the UDC, and they are seen as like higher standard all over the state. People are using Boerne's like LID and drainage regulation as like the one to follow, and they have to comply with all that
Right.
for the
Sarah, I'd
building
like to-
permit and
I-
for the plating part.
Sarah, I'd like to tell everybody on the call what you're saying, but from a design professional that does projects all over the state of Texas. The city of Boerne now has the most restrictive, low impact density development restrictions, and they have more drainage requirements than any other town or major city in the state of Texas. Now Boerne is on the top of the most restrictive development codes in the state of Texas. And we're a big state. So you can rest assured, Scott, there is not going to be any drainage coming off this site without the city putting the litmus
Well-
test and the restrictions part of it. So I'm just telling you, I want everyone on the call for all future development that the city has done their due diligence. And I'm not praising the city. I'm just telling the facts. This is now to do development. It costs a premium in city of Boerne, but developers are willing to do it because it's a beautiful community. And so to their credit, you're not going to have any drainage issues. That has stopped because they have all the stop gaps and the requirements necessary. They are now more restricted than the city of Austin and Santa Fe, New
Yeah,
Mexico.
no, I don't disagree with you on that at all. I will say that the calculations aren't necessarily all that great, being that I am the recipient of, I thought it was solved, but frankly, my property got flooded all the way across from the drainage off of the Canna building or ballroom, whatever it is. What was it, last year? And I woke up thinking that someone had plowed my backyard, and it was just from water that should have gone, but it apparently somebody was off on their calculations. So even though it's highly restricted, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have something happen. And I'm not too worried about it. I think that the city of Boerne, restrictions and the guidelines, it can't put in for everything. In fact, my opinion, city of Boerne kind of goes overboard on some of this stuff. My thing is what is this going to grow into? Because the city of Boerne historically is there's not a real desire to widen School Street, and that's where you can get a lot of traffic. And it's in the city of Boerne isn't going to put out for a School Street. Should this become something bigger? This is just phase 1 or phase 2, whatever phase it is on the church's deal. I don't expect the church just to keep it exactly the way it is, but I would like to have a say so should they try to put something in that's really big and doesn't really give a positive impact to the community. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, yeah, we heard you, Scott. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody has questions and comments? Hearing none for now, I think we're good to go to the next item on the agenda tonight. We're going to be discussing the proposed zoning change for 109 West Evergreen. Let me change the files. So can you guys see my map?
Yes.
Yes.
So this property is also part of Quentin's district, Councilman Quentin's district, currently zone R2M. And the request is to zone it for commercial. They haven't, this is one of the cases that Quentin was talking about, that they haven't submitted an official application. They're trying to understand how the community is gonna perceive the request. Frank Valadez is the representative, and I believe the applicant is also online. So Frank, if you want to explain a little bit of the request, please.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So my client, I'm going to let her speak after I kind of talk about the request. Let's put the zoning map back on first, Sarah, please. That's fine. Thank you. So what the site currently has been utilized for years is a bed and breakfast, and a bed and breakfast was allowed, and it still is grandfathered with that. And And apparently I understand there's been issues with the current or the previous owners that where they've had this as a bed and breakfast. And so my client, Christy Vasquez, will speak on her luxury jewelry store that she wants to put in this historic August house. And what I want to explain is we don't want to just go straight into the zoning. We wanted to talk to the neighbors that are on the line to kind of give our proposal and what our clients are intending to do and what we're going to do from a design standpoint. We are not going specifically for C2 zoning because C2 zoning would allow bars and restaurants, which could be a problem. And you could see that C2 is already zoned across the street and it's to the east of us on those two tracks. And then catty corner on Hosack and Main, C2 is there. And then directly back on the north end, on the south end is C1. So what we're proposing and requesting that the neighbors allow us to go to a C1, which allows retail. And what we're looking to do is luxury jewelry store, which is going to be high-end boutique jewelry store that I'm going to let Christy talk about her business plan. She's been in the business for several years. She knows the business. It will be very successful here and how she's going to operate her business. Let's go ahead and go to the site plan, Sarah. So, and then I'll be able to answer any questions once I finish this presentation. And then once Christy speaks on her behalf of her plan. So what we're proposing to do is because by code, we're not going to have we can't have street parking, and we're obviously going to create on-site parking. And so this is the proposed parking lot, which we would provide vegetation on the north and the south end.
Or historic home.
I think someone has their unmuted. We're here. There. Thank you. So we're going to use the August house, and we're not going to change the perimeter. We're not going to change the historic structure at all. Everything's going to be finished out on the interior. And then there's the existing one-story building along the back that will become an extension of the boutique, and that existing covered patio would be part of that and connecting the two buildings at the south end. And because of the grades that everybody knows that lives in this neighborhood, as you get closer to Hosack, you actually have higher grades. So we're putting the accessible parking on the south end of the site. There's already currently existing drive where the arrows are coming up from West Evergreen. Yes, you can see the drive there. We're just going to refine that and then place the parking along the front of the August house. So everything would be pruned and well landscaped. And then you could kind of see where that car is on the south end. That's actually where the handicap parking will be. And then there's an egress ingress easement that goes to Main Street that is going to be maintained. So it's going to be one-way traffic in from West Evergreen and exit out to Main Street. And so that is the proposed site plan. And then what I'd like to do is have Christy talk about her business plan and what her boutique store would be like, the level of customers that she would be bringing to this site. And also, again, it's not long hours. You won't have the situations that you have with strangers coming in, always new visitors coming into this house. This will be owner occupier of this property. And again, the reason why we only want to go for C1 is so that it's the minimal requirement for retail. We're not asking for C2, which could allow for bars and restaurants. And I know you can have a deli or a restaurant in C1, but there's more parking requirements for a restaurant than retail. And there's not enough property to get parking here for a restaurant. So a restaurant won't meet the parking requirements by the city based on the size of this lot. So it could only serve as retail, which obviously will be very clean, very high-end, boutique, nothing commercial, lighting very subtle and indirect. Anyway, I'd like for Christy to go ahead and jump on and start talking about her vision for her store.
Okay,
Christy,
yes,
thank
I'm
you.
here. Can everybody hear me? I guess they can. I just want to first say thank you for everybody that is attending this meeting tonight. It's I like to see faces when I'm talking to someone, so I like seeing all of your faces. I've been in the business for 32 years. I started out at Hillsburg Diamond and then I moved up from there. I've been in Texas most of my career in the jewelry business. I managed Bailey Banks and Biddle, and that's where I got all my luxury design experience. And then I also managed Lee Michaels. Then I had my son. So my son is 8 years old and I retired for a little while and I came back and just did custom design work most of the time. But I've always had a passion to have my own store and something to provide me and my family with in their futures. So this house has always, this design of this house has always been in the back of my mind, having a little white house. And when I came across this property, it was just the perfect vision. So back to like designers, we're only doing luxury high-end designers. Therefore, like Cartier, Bulgari, Tag Heuer, Constantino, a lot of Greek designers, some German designers. I'm doing a lot of designers that are going to be out of the country that are not accessible in the States. We'll be doing luxury handbags, leather goods, belts, accessories. We'll be doing custom manufacturing, appraisals, and we will have a repair shop in the back area that is that little house in the back now. So that's where the hosting will be for my jeweler back there. I am part of Hill Country Women in Business. I've been on the board there for 2 years with hospitality. I really enjoy it. I moved to Boerne 5 years ago. I was born and raised in Houston and been in Texas pretty much all my life. I know that parking is going to be a big concern with the neighbors. So we only have a couple of events and I want to address these because my big events throughout the year is going to be, of course, a holiday party for Christmas or the grand opening, which is the ribbon cutting, which is probably going to be the most of people that will be in this house at one time at the same time. So the ribbon cutting is probably the biggest concern. I have some ladies that are in our Hill Country Women in Business that would be able to, people that I know will be able to pick them up at a facility and bring them in so we don't have parking on the street. I've never been a fan of businesses and parking on the street. Therefore, I know that that's a big concern for the neighbors that are next to me. So we also have Christmas holidays and Mother's Day. And the same thing, we'll either do a valet service where you will come in and if we have maxed out the parking, then that valet service will be available to a neighboring church parking lot or another facility that I might have access to. And I'm working on those solutions as we speak. I just want to mention as well that I want to keep the integrity of the house, and that's going to be a big one, just making it more beautiful, the appearance more beautiful, keeping the landscape simple, but very elegant, so you can still see this historical pretty house. That's all that I have, and I'm open to discussions and questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Frank and Christy. Does anybody has questions, comments, want to talk about it?
I do.
Go ahead, and
Am I on?
Yes, you are, Dan. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Dan Heckler, and I have a statement I'd like to read. My wife and I have lived on West Evergreen Street for 24 years. Some of my neighbors have lived here for longer. West Evergreen Street is purely a single-family residential dead-end street. I am against the rezoning request for 109 West Evergreen Street for many reasons. I live at 120 West Evergreen Street, which is just diagonally across the street from this house. The owner of that property knew it was zoned residential before and after they bought the house. But they moved in anyway with the intention of living there in this older home as their primary residence. One of the reasons they chose that house is because they knew the current zoning laws would not permit other uses for the properties on West Evergreen Street. It gave them peace of mind knowing that there would not be any businesses or commercial properties on the street. Now they don't care. This street is quiet, safe, and homes are well kept up by everyone. Over the years, many of us have improved our homes, our properties, and have increased our home values. Now the owner doesn't care for me or my neighbors. Quickly and quietly applied for rezoning and wants to turn an older, remodeled home into a commercial business. He plans to make a quick buck and get out of town without regard to the changes that will occur on the street. Traffic will increase on our dead-end street. Home property values will decrease because who wants to live next door or near a structure, even like a jewelry store? Other property owners will be pressured to sell so that other businesses can move on. There will be a domino effect and more businesses will open. Individual profit and gain over a whole neighborhood simply is not being a good neighbor. The owner's personal and selfish request should not demand that the few give up what we want in our neighborhood, what we want it to look like, that we have worked hard for. City zoning ordinance establishes what each property can and cannot be utilized for. Current zonings are well established and should be followed. Changing the currently approved zoning of a property should only be made for unusual circumstances that benefit the city and improves the neighborhood. Ask yourself this question: will changing the zoning from residential to commercial benefit the city? I think not. It only benefits the owner. One more thing. There's a city document called the Boerne 10-Year Master Development Plan. It's an overall plan the city staff and elected officials created to map out development within the city to ensure an even and smarter growth and development for the city. This document does not allow for changes for the single purpose of making a person rich by changing the zoning and selling to the highest bidder. This zoning request does not fit in with the master plan. Do not allow further encroachment on this neighborhood. The city does not benefit from this zoning change, and I urge you to follow the zoning ordinance. Please do not approve the rezoning request of 109 West Evergreen Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I just want to clarify, right now, they haven't submitted an application for it yet. We're just initially discussing with the neighbors.
They did not discuss it with me.
No, this is the initial discussion. They haven't submitted a P&Z zoning request application. The idea of the bond meeting is even before they apply, they come and present the request and try to work with, see what the neighbors have to say about it.
I understand that, Sarah. I think it would have been wiser on their part if they had contacted the neighbors prior to this to get an understanding of what the neighbors would like or dislike about their.
Well, Dan, this is Frank, the architect. I want to clarify something for you and your neighbors. Christy is not the current owner of this property. She has a contract in to purchase the property. So she's not the original owner that is trying to pull a fast one as you stated. She is coming in as with open arms and ears to see how we can work together to make this work. She has a contract on the property, and this is the due diligence period that we are doing. And as Sarah mentioned, we didn't take it for granted that we're going to come bully our way in and just ask for a zoning meeting. So this is our first approach to meet the neighbors. And this is what the city, Laura Henning, said, the bond meeting's the way to do that. And that's why we're here. And also, I just want to state, the Evergreen is not a dead end. We have a left turn on Deer Road so that you're not going to have a bottleneck of traffic and people won't go past this lot. C2 across the street can be a bar and a restaurant at any moment. If that person chooses to sell the property, they will. We're going to be a stopgap for anything like that ever occurring here. And Christie is willing to invest in fencing, vegetation, screening, to work with neighbors. What can we do to make you all feel comfortable to be her, future neighbor of this, this location? And so anyway, I just wanted, I'm not denying what you said, Dan. I just wanted to get some clarification that Christie is not the original owner. The owner is selling the property and Christie has a contract on it.
Okay, that's my mistake. There's no information out there for me to have learned who the original requester was for this property. But my objection
Understood.
still stands against rezoning, regardless of who brings it forward.
Yeah, Frank, this is Mike Berg speaking. So I am at 117 West Evergreen. I'm the property next door. And, to comment a little bit about what, you and Dan are going back and forth on, the house was bought approximately a year ago. I want to say the price was around $630,000, $640,000. The individual who purchased it, I believe, is a developer. As Dan mentioned, I think he had, based on my discussions, intentions to live there. And he puts the property again for sale for over $1 million, within a year. And really, when you're looking at a price per square foot, going commercial is really the only way that individual would expect to get that, in my opinion, in downtown Boerne. That's like probably 1.5 or twofold what I paid price per square foot, no less than probably 2 years ago. So to kind of piggyback off of what Dan suggested, I think the current owner probably had those intentions, whether or not Christie had any knowledge of that or not. Sarah, is it okay if I say a few more words here?
I'm afraid we're going way over topic, but if you make a quick.
I'm coming back on topic. So, so as I said, I'm 117 West Evergreen. I'm the property next door. In addition to Dan, I'm against this. I've got 2 kids that are, 6 and 8. My front yard is where they play. And I would prefer them not essentially playing next to a parking lot. Let me look at some notes here. So, Sarah, another thing I would want to mention is with regards to announcements for bond meeting. This was something that was just, we just saw last week. I know there are several other neighbors who by the time they saw that, they had plans and, and couldn't be here. I guess the other question, and this would be a question for you or Frank, is if you were to rezone as a C1, and forgive me here, I'm not, an architect or extremely familiar with the Boerne use codes, but I see, other things that could fall under a permitted C1 neighborhood are, retail sales, barber shops, beauty shops, medical office. But then I think you do have the special use permit options. Could be a bar, a wine bar, craft alcohol production, mobile food vendor park. So these are all uses that could be, available under a special use permit that would essentially be, as Dan said, within a residential neighborhood. So, that's my concern. My concern is not, is I guess in addition to having parking and having a jewelry store, but would also be, okay, 3 years from now, sorry, Christy, but if the jewelry store doesn't make it in this location, now we're zoned commercial and, what's going to take that place? And then one question I had for Christy would be with regards to security, right? You have a high-end jewelry store. I'm your next door neighbor. How do I know or
Oh, that's a great point. Security is definitely going to be a big one. We're looking at very high-end security for that particular location, surrounding cameras throughout the building and on the exterior of the building. Special events will always have an officer on duty, always. Any special event will always have an officer there, front and rear entrance.
So Christy, would you want to live next to a location that has to have an officer on duty? I mean, this is a legitimate question. This is my home. This is where my kids play.
Well, I think it's not in reference to security for the children, because I have an 8-year-old too. And I totally understand where you're coming from, because I have a little one. That the security is specifically for if I'm showing goods that are over $150,000, my insurance will not allow me if I do not have an officer on duty. So that's the only reason why they would be there, is for that particular reason. It's not that I'm going to have
insurance requires it for a reason. So
yes.
Sarah, can you elaborate if, and maybe educate me, if this were to go to a C1, designation, and let's say the jewelry store didn't make it, are those options that I listed, are those valid options to take its place?
So if you look at the table of uses, all the uses that have a P would be allowed. All the uses that have an S would require what we call a special use permit. The special use permit process is very similar to a rezoning process. You have the public outreach, you notify the neighbors, there is public hearing with the P&Z and city council. And it's the same process of outreach as it would for a rezoning. So I don't know if that necessarily makes it easier or not, but some of the idea of the neighborhood commercial is that it's the least impactful of the commercial zoning categories that we have. And all the uses that maybe a little bit more would require a special use permit. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that does. I'm just looking at that table, right, and just seeing, what would be permitted and what could take its place on a residential street. And there are a number of things there. When I purchased this home, that I had no intention of living next door to. So as Dan, I'm against this, and I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Just one point that I would like to make. Frank mentioned this earlier. We also have parking requirements depending on the use. So retail has one parking for every 300 square feet of store. Different uses would require more or less parking. So that would also limit the use based on that availability of parking.
If I can interject on that comment, Sarah, there's a dental clinic right next door to 109 West Evergreen Street. It has a parking lot, but it's very small. And there are people who continually park on the street because there are no available slots in the parking lot for the dental clinic. So even though they have parking, they don't have adequate parking, and it's never, ever enforced. Street parking is allowed, and they will take advantage of it. So the parking requirements just do not hold up when it comes to, do you have enough spaces for cars to park?
Well, Mr. Heckler, what she's saying is that as the fact that if a special use permit was somehow approved, which would be harder, in my opinion, to ask for a bar or restaurant to be approved here, if for any reason Christie was to turn around and want to sell the property or lease it out, there's just not enough real estate to get it required. For a bar, you need one space for every 100 square feet. That's 3 times the parking spaces that we're showing on our site plan. Sarah, if you could put that back up.
And I'm not talking about a bar. I'm just talking about having adequate parking. And it doesn't seem like the dental clinic doesn't, and it surely doesn't mean that the jewelry store will have parking available either.
I understand what you're saying, sir. And yes, you're still allowed to park on the street. There is no way we can prohibit people from parking on the street.
Yeah, I know.
We just kind of have to work with trying to make them have enough parking to work for their end
That'll
user.
never happen.
Yeah.
Why spend money when you don't have to?
Does anybody have more questions and comments?
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, I'm Aaron Satcham. I live in 203 West Evergreen. I'm pretty much opposed to this as well. And gonna kind of follow up as my neighbors have said is, you know, this is a residential neighborhood. We don't have sidewalks. You know, it's a narrow street. We get a lot of through traffic already. Adding a business in here, and I understand, Christy, it's going to be small and very specific clientele, and I appreciate that. But the amount of traffic we get through this road, the ability to even take a left-hand turn out of West Evergreen on most days, and especially not on weekends, with the added business here, the added cars there, it's just going to make this neighborhood that much harder to live in. And then going back to the kids, there's a lot of families here with kids on the block, and this added traffic is to me is dangerous, especially in the street with no sidewalks, or we're just not built to handle a business. And Christy, I appreciate you having this meeting and hearing this out, but and as Dan has said, I think I know from us talking to all of our neighbors, everyone is very, very opposed to this business. This meeting came up quick. There wasn't a lot of information, so I know a lot of people didn't call in, and we have a few neighbors out of town. But from talking to the 5 or 6 neighbors that we've talked to, this is not something we're going to welcome or be happy about. So I know this is your dream, but I'm just thinking this would be better to put this in a district that's built for retail and not our neighborhood. So that's my only input. Thank you.
Just one information. So we're trying to work with the bond notification as best as we can, but the deadline to submit applications, it was, let me get here my papers. It was on the 9th. So that's when they had to submit applications, and we tried to put this bond sign. I think it was Wednesday last week. So the 9th was the Friday before. We worked put on the Wednesday and try to notify the neighbors as fast as possible. And we try to get the word out. This is why we ask people to sign up for the city mailing, where they send out the notification of weekly events, and kind of keep an eye out. And also that sign that's in front of the property. I know it's not ideal. We're trying to come up with better ways, but we also don't have a lot of time between one thing and the other. So we apologize.
No, Sarah, I appreciate this. This is actually nice that you're doing this conversation before it even goes up to city council and the planning committee. So this is, I'm sorry if that came off negative against you guys. I appreciate this call and this meeting. I think this is very useful. I just letting you know that maybe not everyone is called in, but I'm saying with a lot of confidence. It's not something any of us are excited about.
Once this becomes an official request and it goes to Planning and Zoning Commission, we'll send out the paper notification, and then you can send your response to us, and we'll have all that added to the to the Planning and Zoning Commissioners information. I also see somebody that I don't know the name that have a question.
Is it me?
Yes, it's you.
Yeah. I just really more or less want to chime in with the rest of the neighbors. I appreciate this. And I understand what Christy is wanting, what her dream is. But every other neighbor here has correctly stated, this is a residential neighborhood. And even though you get to the top of the street where it's Main Street, if you face on Main Street, I understand that's going to be a business probably. But once you get to the houses that are behind that and going into the neighborhood, that's to me where you begin to get the danger of one house goes and the next house goes, and all of a sudden you don't have a neighborhood anymore. You have a mix of commercial and residential, and you see this in Fredericksburg, and it's not pretty. So I really do wish Christy well, and but I wish us better, because we've got a lot invested in this neighborhood, and we do, like Mike Berg said, we've got kids who go up and down the street on their bikes with training wheels. We walk dogs, and it is virtually a dead-end street. I know that Mr. Valadez says it wasn't, and we get a lot of people who fly down here. They hit that dead-end cul-de-sac, and then they go flying down Deer Street. So this is just going to be more people trying to figure out how to get it in and out of West Evergreen. And I just don't think this is the right place for that business. So thank you very much for having the meeting.
You're welcome. So, well, if anybody has any more comments, I think we can jump to the next and last item on the agenda tonight. Do you guys want to say something else, Christy, Frank?
I don't have anything. Christy, did you want to say anything else
Yeah.
before we leave the meeting?
I just wanted to make just one statement. So it's listed as an Airbnb. And I know that the Airbnb has been an issue with the neighbors, with police being called and so forth. So my statement to you is that can continue to be an Airbnb, and you don't know who's going to be there. Or you have a luxury business that's there and you know who your neighbor is. So, and that doesn't change. You never have people that are overnight. My business hours, we close at 5, never open on Sunday. Probably not open on Monday either. So I guess that's something to consider as well, is that if it does stay as zoning as it is commercial. There can't be a residential person purchasing it as a residential contract. It has to be a commercial contract. And that's what I have been told for my lending purposes as well. So it is a lending as commercial. And that's just all I want to say. That's it.
And I want to say thank you for everybody's time and input. And we do want to work with you and understand your feelings. But again, thanks for your time. Sarah, thank you. And Laura for putting this bond meeting together for our project. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So we have the third and last item on the agenda tonight. This request would be a special use permit for a few different uses. So we'll talk about it in a little bit. The property is located at 12 Herff. Currently, it's on C1 with the Heritage Corridor Overlay District. It's that property that has old rock house right on Herff. We have a few of the developers representative present. This property is part of City Council Member Bryce Bodie's district. He's also present here. Bryce, do you want to say something?
I'm here to listen.
That sounds good too. I see Sarah Holmes and also Melanie on. Do you guys want to go over the project? I will put the latest layout that you guys send me on just a second.
That'd be great. We'll give you a second.
Do you see my screen?
I do.
Yes.
All right, so to the neighbors that have joined us from the surrounding communities, thank you so much for participating tonight. My name is Melanie Bagley. I'm working with the Woodmont Company and Kitty Academy Corporate and your future local fellow business neighbors to create this development that you see before you today. As Sarah mentioned, we're here today for a special use permit, which is in line with, which would be for a daycare, for a Kitty Academy childcare facility, which is in line with the contents of the application that was under review, I think, almost this time last year, Sarah, for a variance from this property. As you can see here, we're adhering to the suggested buffer yards that were discussed in that agreement, in that variance meeting. And we are also proposing a potential drive-through use that would also require a special use permit. And so while we don't have the details of that just yet, we wanted to present that in concept to you here for any feedback. But I want to note that our primary focus today is truly the Kitty Academy. We've created a development plan here that contemplates reuse of one of the existing curb cut that is page right there on Herff Road. Thank you, Sarah. And that was a condition that was implemented again as part of the rezoning and the variances that were approved. We're also proposing a secondary curb cut, which again is in line with that was contemplated for this piece of property. There is an existing homestead or residence home structure, if you will, on the property right there. Thank you, Sarah, that we intend to repurpose. We see the value in maintaining that. And the tenant of that is yet to be decided, but is expected to be a needing establishment of sorts, fine dining, casual dining. We feel that this site plan adheres to the standards in the zoning code. But again, we're here before you today to discuss any questions that you might have related to the business itself. Kitty Academy is a first-class establishment. We provide childcare for infants all the way up to ages 6 and potential after-school programs and summer programs for kids even older. As I mentioned, the facility is open from 6:30 a.m. Sorry, I did not mention the facility is open from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. I want to mention that this is not a concierge type service. Parents will have to park and bring their kids into the school. There's not a drop-off situation here. The circulation has been contemplated for the overall site plan and for the childcare and for the drive-through that contemplates fire truck access. It contemplates access for dump trucks, trash trucks, excuse me. And as some of you may have heard, also contemplates all of the stormwater requirements for a parcel of this nature, this size. So I have a plethora of team members on here with me, and again, including the future business owners, the future operators, representatives from Kitty Academy Corporate, and representatives from the Woodmont Company as well. I also have Mark Miller, who's with the Westwood Company, who's our civil engineer of record, and can speak to any technical questions anybody might have. So with that, I'll yield the rest of my time to your questions and comments. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. So for some reason, I can't see it. Everybody right now. Here. Does anybody have questions or comments? Want to talk about the request? I see somebody with their hand raised. It's you, Bryce.
So how big is this development acreage?
Let me get to it. I don't know. Do you, Melanie or Sarah, do you guys know the acreage of the tract right now?
I believe Grant it's not coming to me off the top of my head. Forgive me. Are we at a little over 5 acres?
Yeah, it's approximately 5. I'm
Thank
just confirming here momentarily as well.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was
I-
looking for precise, but
It's
yes.
it's 4.35 based on the legal descriptions, Bryce.
And so we want a drive-through with the childcare place? I'm so confused. So childcare, a high-end restaurant, and a drive-through on 4 acres. This is kind of weird. Never seen anything like that before. So tell me about the drive. You're saying possible drive-through. What does that mean?
Yeah, no,
Sure.
hey, this is Grant with Woodmont. Happy to address that. You know, as Melanie noted, the primary driver here is the childcare facility, Kitty Academy, and just really we've been looking at sites for a year and a half, 2 years now, just given the need in the community. The drive-through that you see there is a proposed small coffee shop, is what is programmed, and I think part of, as Melanie noted, we don't have that finalized yet at this point. You know, we do see an opportunity or potential there, given, you know, the traffic that's coming through this site and the going to work side. The reason why you see that layout, maybe somewhat of an oddly configured placement, you know, in an otherwise relatively small building, is the intent that was predominantly a drive-through only facility that still had an exterior entrance. And then the intent, at least from a planning programming standpoint, was to utilize as much of the existing tree cover that you see there on the site plan for outdoor seating. But again, conceptual in nature at this time.
Correct. So Sarah, real quick, the special use permit, there's 2 different special use permits being requested here. One is for childcare and the other is for drive-through. Is that correct?
So it would be, same as the previous one, they haven't officially applied for it. There are a few
Right.
requirements for the special use permit, like the TIA, and have to prove the queuing and all that stuff that you've seen in other discussions. But yes,
the
you'll be
drive-through.
you'll be 2 separate applications, one for the daycare and the second one for the drive-through facility. They can be considered in the same meeting, but as separate items.
And tell me about the curb cut again. Is that off of Herff, the second curb cut?
Both curb cuts are out of Herff. Those are variances that were, so the north one is existing, right? Next to the existing house. The second one was approved, I think it was 2019, if I'm not mistaken. They had some requirements to build, I think it's a hooded left turn. There were things that were specifically discussed already considering a daycare. Since this was initially discussed many years ago, it was the idea of having a daycare, and that was all done considering the traffic impact of it.
So that variance for that second curb cut has already happened?
For the curb cut
Was-
location, yes.
Was there a TIA done on any of that at that time that was approved?
Yes. Sorry,
Okay.
this is Mark Miller. Yeah, there was a TIA that was performed back 2019, 2020 timeframe that laid out
Okay.
that driveway location, and also, as Sarah mentioned, the hooded left turn.
Okay. I just saw the numbers today for that intersection. It's super high right there, and this is going to create a whole different situation right there because there's no signal right there either. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. And one other thing is, it looks like, I know you're saving trees here, but there's a lot of impervious cover on this plan. So I know that's a different phase, but I just want to throw that out there. That low impact development's important, especially in this area. So, because it's going straight down to the creek. But I'm good. I'll let others ask.
Yeah, so as a C1, they would be allowed 75% of impervious cover, but the heritage corridor reduces it to 70 because of the creek and how that all was put together. Anybody has other questions, want to make some comments? So as I mentioned before, this is the initial conversation. They don't have an official application for it yet. There's still some questions that need to be answered before this goes to P&Z. And Bryce, if whenever we have an application, you would be notified as well.
Thank you.
We understand that also there's the zoning, and then they're gonna have to finalize the plating. The other things that will need to be done before that can go above ground.
So that, just to clarify one more time, the childcare is one SUP, correct? And then a drive-through coffee shop is a second SUP.
Yes, you'll be a separate
So-
SUP.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I don't see anybody with questions. If anybody has questions later on, feel free to reach out and send us an email. Let me stop this. I really appreciate everybody being on tonight. People that wait until the end. This meeting will
Thank you,
be.
Sarah.
You're welcome. The meeting will be available on the city's YouTube channel if you guys want to watch it later on. If you have some questions, send us an email. At this time, the only item that's going to be on the P&Z meeting in October is going to be the 416 West Highland rezone from R1M to Civic. And if you are within that 200 feet of the request, you'll be notified as well. And I think that's all for tonight, people.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Yep.
Thanks. Good night.